Right now, I would like to introduce Christy McKinley and Sean Browning, who will finish session 1 with a CD release 1.2 overview.
All right. Thanks, Shandy, and I just want to welcome everybody again, and thank you for participating, and say thanks to the whole EBI staff. We've done a great job working on this. And thanks to our detailees, Kara, Shandy, and Heather Henson, and then all the CDSI gnomes that are out there. It takes a village of gnomes to make all this work and happen behind the scenes and get things fixed and test and train, etc. And you folks know who you are out there. So appreciate it. We're going to go through real quick here and give you an overview. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay on what you're going to, some of the functionality that you're going to see in release 1.2 of Conservation Desktop. Next slide, please. So we often talk about a CDFA and a CDTA, and really Conservation Desktop is always meant to be a one software that's integrated and brings in functionality from both sides. So as you hear us frequently refer to that, please know that we only do that for ease of discussion. So when we say a CDFA, for example, we're really just talking about financial assistance functionality in Conservation Desktop, or if we say by the TA side, we're really just talking about that functionality. So, what's new in release 1.2 for FA? We're going to talk a little bit about task management and document management and integration with Conservation Client Gateway. Next slide, please. So, in release 1.2, we added additional workflows through to develop contracts and modify contracts. It'll also include all the release 1 workflows and tasking for applications, eligibility, and ranking. So now you can start all the way from a new application and get all the way through modifying a contract, developing and modifying contracts. Next slide, please. We've added filtering to the tasking system to help, especially for those that have multiple service centers that they're dealing with. This should give you the ability to focus in on the tasks specific to a particular service center if you need to do that. Next slide. Some additional functionality related to tasks with the ability that managers can go ahead and assign people with management roles can go ahead and assign tasks to their staff if they want to. There's the ability to reject a task if you get one assigned to you, but you are unable to complete it. It'll put it back in the queue. The ability to start work and escalate tasks. An escalation would include something where you couldn't get the work performed, so you need to pass it to a supervisor type person or someone with a higher level of authority. Next slide. We've added document management. That's a significant thing that's happened in release 1.2, so I'll be able to view documents related to our clients, the agreements, practice schedules, or practices. And this is taking over or starting to integrate the document or DMS functionality now into the Conservation Desktop. Next slide, please. We've added the ability to upload. So we're still working on some of the additional pieces in doc management. There's other things that you can do inside of DMS today, and we're slowly integrating those pieces. But one of the things we can do is we can view those documents, we can print them, we can save them off, we can also upload new documents for a client agreement, schedule, or practice. Next slide. We've added things called document collections. So we know that there are several review points in the financial assistance process for things like doing a pre-approve of an application or doing an obligation review or in the future payment reviews and those things. And so what we've done is instead of just kind of rifling through all the documents for a particular client or an agreement, this collection is designed to have all those documents in one place so that you can kind of go look at it. It's a way to kind of organize them to make your life hopefully more efficient and better. Next slide. We've added the ability to view client documents, what we call out of context. As you know, if you've used Conservation Desktop, we typically go and search for a client, and it brings them into what we call the table of contents on the left-hand side of the desktop, and that's what we call being in context. It means that you picked a client, basically. What we've done, and typically the documents work that way too, so when I pick a client, then I'm looking at the documents for that client, but we've added the ability to go in and just do a search for a client in the client search, as opposed to going and looking for an agreement or a case file and practice schedule, etc. And so this will enable us to look at documents for somebody. This is particularly important if you have a participant that isn't a decision maker. Next slide, please. We've added the ability to upload documents. So once I'm viewing that client, and I've gone and done a search out of context, I can actually go in and upload documents for them also. Next slide. We've added Conservation Client Gateway user reports. So you'll have the ability to look at these reports, and it'll give you a listing of people in your service center or your county that are registered to Conservation Client Gateway. There's 3 of them there at this point. Next slide. And then we've integrated the CPA 1200 financial assistance request. And so that when you're going into Conservation Client Gateway, it can actually submit one of those electronically. It'll go into doc management and enable the agreement life cycle to move forward along with that. Next slide. I think this is our transition. I think that's the last one on FA. Nope. We've got viewing client records, so we can actually go in, and if I picked a person in the Conservation Desktop, I can go in and look at their information in Client Gateway through a fairly quick pull-down menu there. Next slide. All right. I think this is my transition, so I'm going to hand it over now to Christy McKinley, who's going to talk about some of the new features on the technical assistance side of the Conservation Desktop.
All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Christy McKinley that's speaking. We're going to transition over, and we're going to now talk about several of the changes that's been made to the technical assistance portion of Desktop, which is the toolkit replacement. This release covers several things, including managing clients, which is adding clients to your case file and practice schedules, which in Toolkit would be your customer folder and your conservation plan. The transfer tool is in this release. Also, we are getting into updating some of the existing practices from the practice schedule, entering the plan approval, and then we have several geospatial tools in this release that we'll cover in more detail as we go through tomorrow's session. This release does not replace Toolkit, but it begins to allow you to start editing existing practices and doing some things like we just mentioned without having to check out that customer folder in Toolkit, which a lot of the folks that have been testing have said that's one of the big things they see as a benefit to this, as well as a lot of this integration that we're going to go through as we go through these next 2 days. Let's go ahead and change slides. Sorry, I didn't mean to cough in the phone. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our client search. The client search, this is a new feature in Conservation Desktop that allows you to complete a SCIM search or business partners, but we still call it SCIMs as far as how we use it in Toolkit. So this is where we're going to go and start doing searches to create new conservation case files. So we're creating a case file or a customer folder, which is the conservation one, but we can also create easement case files. We can view documents in DMS, and like Sean just mentioned, we can also view client CCG information. The client search allows you to do a service center client, so it's looking at your preferences. from your user preferences for the service centers and counties that you have selected, or you can also do a national search if you want to go outside of your preferences. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide and kind of go through this a little bit. So the client search is where we can start to create the conservation case file. Once you do a search, you can quickly create a conservation case file for any client in SCIMS. This is also can be done directly from the table of contents. So if you already have a client and a case file or agreement that's already open and you want to create a second case file for that client, you can actually do it directly in the table of contents. So there's a couple different options. This is just showing one of those options. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. This release also covers doing a client search for easement clients. So this is a little different search. This allows you to create an easement case file for a new easement application that's been entered in NEST, or for an existing NEST easement that doesn't already have an easement case file. So these easement clients are coming directly out of NEST, which is what we use today, and allows you to go ahead and create that easement case file. All right, let's go to the next one. So adding clients to the existing case file. So this is also new. This is where we can go in and we can add clients to your existing case files by simply adding, selecting this Add Client button. It's going to do a search, go into that search menu that we just looked at a few seconds ago, and do a quick search from SCIMS. Select the client that you want to add to the case file. So this is what we're doing in CD that replaces our General tab and Toolkit for adding, removing clients, and also updating the decision maker that you can see up there in the menu. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The next slide is we're going to cover the practice schedule approval. So this is the plan approval from Toolkit. You can now see a list of certified planners, some of the changes that's been made to select from to add to the conservation plan signature page. You'll also see a plan report signature box has been added for future integration that we're working on right now for another release coming at the end of the year. This is where we're going to integrate with the document system to integrate the conservation plan products, which is going to be the Toolkit Wizard replacement that's coming out in September. And so I just want to point that out. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Editing practices. So we're going to cover editing practices tomorrow. This release allows you to open up the practice schedule from the table and then be able to edit existing practice attributes. So what we're seeing on the couple of screens here is the planned amounts. You can edit the, anything that you have in your practice schedule right now. You also see the practice narratives. We do have the priorities. Applying practices is also found in the Certify tab, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow as far as some of the changes. Let's go ahead and go to the transfer tool. So the transfer tool replaces everything in the Toolkit transfer tool except the document transfer. So we're going to go through and cover the transfer tool. The document transfer, when it's built in CD, instead of transferring documents on the local customer folders or the local customer server, local server, this is actually, we're going to go into transferring documents that are in DMS. Conservation Desktop is going to be tied directly to DMS. We're also working on a future release to tie it on a back door to get to your local server for anything that's sitting out there on those servers tied to those documents that have not made it into DMS yet. But this is what we have that we're going to cover tomorrow for the transfer tool. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So a lot of changes have been made to the GIS toolbar. You can see that it's really been expanded upon since the first release. The above graphic shows the difference in the number of GIS tools from the first release. So I think there was 8 tools in our toolbar. This release, there's 20 buttons, 20 different tools that we're going to cover in detail, so you can start to see the GIS toolbar has really grown. We have a lot more functionality, and then we're getting, we're working right now, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, on the editing tools that the field offices will use, such as the Planning Land Unit Editor. We're going to show that tomorrow. But we're also working on all the other editor tools that you have in ArcMap. So this is what we're covering in this release. So let's go ahead and open up some of those tools and show them. The first one we're going to talk about is the Identify tool. The Identify tool works from the active layer from the map contents. When there's stacked geometry, such as if you have practice polygons that are stacked, you'll see an arrow to page through the different records to review in the attributes. So this does work off your active layer, and you can see that's what the Identify tool looks like. So let's go ahead and go to the next tool, and the next tool is the Find tool. The Find tool will allow you to do a search to find tracts, legals, which are your PLSS layers, if you have that in your state, also looking for easements, addresses, and you can also do a lat-long search. Most of these use a county and state choice list from your preferences, and that's used in basically every one of these Find tools except for the easement and lat-long search. So that way you don't have to do a lot of hunting and pecking to find what you need to find in Conservation Desktop. So that's one of the features that you won't see in Toolkit that's been added to CD as an enhancement. Let's go to the next tool. The next tool is the Filter tool. So the Filter tool combines the Practice Filter tool that in Toolkit is in ArcMap and also in the Practice Schedule. So this combines this into one filter tool that controls what is shown from the map and in the Practice Schedule table at the same time. And so in the addition to this, from what we see in Toolkit today, is that we've added a land unit filtering capability. So it allows you to select out, so you've got a conservation plan that's open right now. It shows you what land units, what practices are in that plan. It allows you to filter both. That way you can view it on the map, and also you're going to see it in your Practice Schedule table. So in the future, this tool will be used to filter out what you need to see on the map in order to develop a conservation plan product, as well as viewing anything on your screen. So this is kind of one of those tools that's going to be used quite a bit. Let's go ahead and go to the next toolbar. This is the Add Bookmark. This is also something that you can use, that you can add quickly a bookmark and then zoom back to that area next time you log in to Conservation Desktop. Bookmarks are specific to this case file that you have open. So you're creating a bookmark for the specific case file. So if there's certain things that you want to be able to get back to, this will save it in that case file. All right, let's go to the next tool. The next tool we're going to talk about is the Measure tool. This tool can be used to measure area or perimeter of a polygon, length of a line, or to view coordinates for a specific point. So this is also one of the new tools we're going to cover tomorrow. Let's go to the next tool, and that's going to be our Drawing tool. The Drawing tool will allow the planner to draw graphics such as polygons, rectangles, circles, lines, and points on the map. You can then select graphics that will summarize the selected graphics to view basically the total area, the length, and also delete your graphics. Graphics are not going to be saved outside of basically what you're currently working on. And so if you log off or you open up another case file or go do something else, the graphics are going to be cleared or deleted from your screen. So they're just kind of there for you to use at the time. And so that's one of the things we'll cover in more detail as well tomorrow. Let's go to the next tool. The next tool is going to be the Buffer tool. So the Buffer tool replaces the ArcMap Buffer tool that we use now in Toolkit ArcMap. This version of Conservation Desktop for the Buffer tool is right now going to only create a buffer for a point, line, and a polygon. In the future, the buffer will be able to be created in an editable layer, such as being able to create it in the Case Value layer or the appropriate practice layer that you're trying to create that feature for. So it'll work just like we have it set up today in Toolkit. We don't have the practice editor or the Case Value editor in this release. And so as soon as those are built, you'll be able to pull what you're buffering into those specific layers. And so that's coming out. Let's go ahead and go to the next tool. I think that may be it. Sorry. Yep, I think that's the last tool we have to cover. So with that, that's all I have. We're real excited to show you some of these tools. There's a lot more coming. And like I said, this is some of the newest stuff that we have to show you. We'll show you some newer stuff tomorrow that's coming out for the next release. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Shandy.